progressing maybe more than others is the development of digital humanities, and that means the application of computers toward the processing of texts and other objects in thinking in an integrated way about the whole field of Indology, just as digital humanities is focused on thinking about texts and other resources across all of the humanistic fields. So what I'm going to be talking about here is those developments over the last century and a quarter, with an eye toward thinking of what Justice Telang might do now if he were still alive and with us. It's an act of projection, it's an act of imagination, but it was an interesting challenge for me to think about a person who was such an important contributor to the field of Indology, and to think what he might do with a much broader array of resources at his fingertips. We'll be talking a little bit about the new resources, about the techniques, and about the humanities and humanistic social science techniques and methodologies that have developed. So I've given the title Integrative Indology, and as a courtesy to you, I mentioned I should define what integrative means. It's not at all transparent, I would imagine. From my perspective, what integrative means is bringing together intellectual and other resources that might not otherwise be connected with one another for the very sake and for the purpose of enriching understanding and for the creation of new knowledge. That's my definition of what integrative means. Now, to give you a few examples of what an integrative approach means, I hope you'll forgive me for referring back to my home institution. I know it best. But at the University of Chicago, I think integrative approaches have been practiced for a long time. I've experienced it myself. I've been a party to this. And what it means is that the barriers, first of all, between our academic divisions and the departments such as history, political science, law, musicology, all of those barriers are intentionally kept very low. Our faculty and our students are encouraged on an active way to join up with their colleagues and to think about their topic from a very different perspective than what they might be trained in. It's a challenge, and it's not always easy. It requires strength. The university developed what it's calling the Center for Integrative Sciences. Again, applying this idea that there should be low barriers between the different divisions, the different methodologies. What we've seen is the development of new knowledge in ways that have resulted from by bringing these two together, there have been new and creative insights as to how the mind functions, both at the level of biological detail, but also in terms of psychological understanding. More recently, that is only 3 years ago, the university developed a new integrative approach. It's called the Neubauer Collegium for Culture and Society. We received a challenge from one of our donors that we should find ways in which the barriers between the humanistic, social sciences, and the humanities should be further reduced. This body, the Neubauer Collegium, is providing incentives through grants to support the interaction of people, again, who might not otherwise collaborate. And here, I'd like to give you a very specific and recent example. Just 2 weeks ago, I found out that my colleagues and I have received a major grant for 3 years to explore a topic that we are putting under the label of interwoven. That's the catch term. By interwoven, what we're doing is looking at the sonic and visual histories of the entire Indian Ocean area and trying to think about what it means for sound, for the carriers of sound, for images, across this broad expanse from Eastern Africa all the way to Southeast Asia, but centered in South Asia itself, to be addressed in creative ways that will allow us to think with new methodologies we develop how these resources that now are dispersed and that people often don't think about together, and to try to make new assertions about what is possible by integrating these audio and visual resources. Well, having described integrative Indology, at least from my perspective, current, let me step back for a moment and bow in the direction of Justice Telang. I think of him as being someone who practiced integrative thinking, from what I can tell, looking at his works, but in a different way than what I have in mind right now by talking about integrative Indology. There are some people, and I think Justice Telang is one of them, who are capable as individuals to bring together in their person broad and expansive methodological approaches, a broad knowledge of texts, a great knowledge in the case of Justice Telang about administration. He was an able administrator, including his leadership here for the Asiatic Society of Bombay. But to think about them in creative ways that gave rise to new knowledge. He brought that vast knowledge he had of Dharma-shastra through his studies to his practice as a judge. And that informed the way in which he went about his work. That's a creative and integrative approach. I think of him as being in the same category almost as that great luminary from centuries ago, Hemachandra, in the field of Indology. There are some people who, as individuals, are so brilliant that they can integrate into themselves and think creatively across vast domains. Now, I have to say, either it's the Kali Yuga, and we can't do that now, and there are very few people who have those same skills to integrate, or maybe more logically and practically, the understanding of different fields. Our expansion in the field of knowledge and our understandings of different disciplines has grown so much that it's beyond the individual capacity of any one person to function as a Hemachandra did, or as a Telang did a century and a quarter ago. For that reason, what I'll be talking about when I talk about integrative disciplines is bringing together people who can think together in teamwork, who can challenge one another from the perspectives of their own disciplines, and who can carry on and produce new knowledge in collaboration with one another, rather than thinking alone as individuals. I hope you will bear with here. This is the... So what I'll be talking about is integrative Indology in three different ways. Integration across disciplines, and this is the area I've been speaking about just now. I'll be talking maybe at more length about the question of integration across. As a bibliographer, I'm passionate about building resources and making them available for people to use. I'm not used to working in the dark. I wonder if we can have a little bit of light. Thank you. And that is integration across resources. Here, as I've mentioned, the digital humanities provides a base for much of what I'll be saying. We now have resources, and I think many of you are aware of this, many of you use these digital resources that are easy to access. These are resources that are often available through the internet. Others are available on other media, such as CD or DVDs. But we have a host of resources that previously was about the complexity of doing research. Here in India, and I know this from my own research, in days when I was a graduate student in Pune, I got a copy of the text I needed. This is changing gradually, and it's changing for the good, I believe. But I'll be looking at ways here in which it's going to be possible to integrate not just the resources for people to see, but to allow those resources to speak to one another in creative ways that will enable the production of new knowledge. I mentioned that there have been new discoveries, and this is in the field of Indology. I think some of you will know that in the last century and a quarter, and in fact more recently, only about 15 years ago, there was a stunning discovery that took place on the border between Pakistan and India. The Kharosthi manuscripts that were taken out of what was effectively a Geniza for old Buddhist texts found their way to the British Library. These Kharosthi manuscripts, now available, now being studied both in England and also at the University of Washington, are for the first time texts that can be seen in the last 2 millennia of the Sanskrit versions of the Buddhist canon, parts of the Buddhist canon. Before this discovery, people thought that it was only the Pali that would ever be available for people to use for understanding Buddhist traditions. Now we have a whole new body of literature that's been opened for us. This I bring up as an example of a new discovery. Next, I'd like to talk with you a little bit about texts. And here, it's easiest for me to draw upon our digital South Asia library. The URL is given. I hope you will visit if you have not yet had a chance to see it. But we've been bringing together gradually the kinds of resources that one would want to see for doing work in the field of Indology, but also South Asian studies. One finds in the abstracts of British colonial India. It includes maps, mapping. There's the beginning of audio resources, texts, teaching materials, and dictionaries. What I do, though, is to hone in for a moment on the topic of texts and some other activities that we've had underway for a long period of time. Appreciated. And I say that because just as Telang was involved in the editing of some of the most important Indological texts himself. Beginning in the 1980s, we had a project we called the Indological Series Project. This was for the first time an attempt to assess what was published from the earliest period, that is the beginning of the Bibliotheca Indica series at your sister body, the Asiatic Society in Calcutta. Beginning with that very first series, we've identified all the Grantamalas that were published up until 1990, and some of you may be astonished, I was, to discover that there are more than 1,410 Indological series. By Indological series, I mean a series that's focused primarily on Sanskrit, Prakrit, or Pali. In those 1,410 series plus, there are more than 24,600 individual titles that were published. Much more than Justice Telang could ever have appreciated, because he passed away at the end of the 19th century, well before some of these series got underway. As I said, he was a contributor to the series, but that tradition that he was part of carries on. So in this period of the 1990s, we undertook a project that would not only document all of them, and we have bibliographic details for all of these monographs, the 24,600, but additionally, the 610 most important monographic series, the Grantamalas, we were able to preserve through microfilming. I hope you'll hold on to that idea, because microfilm, for all of its value as a preservation medium, is not a friendly medium when it comes to reading. If any of you have tried sitting in front of a microfilm reader, you know how painful it can be for a long time. Hold on to that idea, because we are moving into a new era with the conversion of microfilm. One other example of a text that falls under the category of secondary text I'd like to point to, as an example, is the monumental work undertaken by P.D. Kane. Now, I mention him specifically because he is one of my personal heroes as an academic. But also, I mention it because I had the pleasure of sitting and taking coffee in the very room where he did his work for the history of Dharma Shastra. What I think of as one of the most illustrious pieces of single-handed scholarship that's ever been undertaken. I mention this in part because it is so closely connected, P.V. Kane is, with the Asiatic Society of Mumbai's own heritage. But I also raise it because, again, I would like you to hold on to it, the history of Dharma Shastra, as an example of a text that can be integrated in different ways if we can get into the contents of P.V. Kane's work and make those contents speak to other kinds of contents. Well, let me move on then to talk a little bit about our digital dictionaries program. This was a program begun also in the 1990s, late 1990s. Our intention is that at the end, whatever that may be, we will have encompassed all of the literary languages of South Asia with at minimum one dictionary that will be from that language to English. But for the sake of the languages that are more often taught, studied, and examples include Sanskrit, they include the Prakrits, Persian, Hindi, Urdu. We're trying to make available also monolingual dictionaries. A monolingual dictionary, of course, is just a dictionary that has both the headwords and also the definitions included in the same language. An example, well, I won't go on to an example. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. One of the earliest dictionaries that we took on was the very famous Hobson Jobson, a text that was created by Mr. Yule. It's a whimsical text. It's great fun reading. I encourage you to look at it if you haven't spent time with it. His definitions are amazing, sometimes wacky. But I bring this up as an example because what we're expecting to do now with our dictionaries as we move forward is to use the dictionaries as a pivot point. What do I mean? Here I give you an example of the entry for Sanskrit. And what you'll see, as is the case with most dictionaries